Glorious. Hello, 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 ladies and gentlemen. Can you hear what I'm saying? If you can hear what I'm saying, then the audio is configured correctly. Hello, hello. Okay. Ta-da! I bring you podcast from live stream. Okay. Here we go. Podcast or live stream, take 2. Now, the tricky thing is, before we get started here, I'm not sure which is better, because if you use the YouTube chat, which I'm looking at right now, I can see exactly what you're saying, but those things go away forever. So do we punish those that aren't able to make the live stream by talking in the actual YouTube chat, or do we be nice to those people and put it in the Patreon chat? The shitty part about the Patreon comment section is that I can't actually see, while I'm doing it, I can't see the comments. So you would sort of just be talking amongst yourselves. My gut feeling is we punish the people that haven't shown up. I don't know. I'll leave it up to you. But know that I'm not actually looking at the Patreon comments now. So I looked at all the questions before we started, but and there's quite a few questions, so the chances of me actually getting to all of them are almost 0. But if you put a question in the YouTube chat, chances are I will see it. So hopefully this works. Now, this week, number 1, if you're watching this and there is a problem, please put it in the chat, because I'm not listening to it. I have no idea if there's an issue. I'm not seeing the video feed or anything like that. I'm just blindly going into this. So if you want to help me out and make sure this doesn't sound or look like shit, please put it in the chat. That way I know. And when I'm pointing like this, the screen that I'm looking at that has me on it is over there. So I will be referring. Yeah, exactly. Somebody take minutes. That's what we need. Somebody taking notes. And maybe what I'm going to do, and maybe we get Wonder Boy to do it, because Wonder Boy has been absent from the podcast. But I almost need someone to moderate the chat and then to fire out the questions, so I don't have to spend, if you're watching me for fucking 5 minutes, as I'm looking over at what questions I should be answering, doesn't really use the best, bring the best value to your time. So anyway, that's enough of the live stream stuff, the details. Now I'm imagining it's working, so we'll just take it from there. This week we are looking at somebody's work that got sent in, and it's a spec. I believe it's a spec job, just based on all the issues with it. But it's a spec job, and it's a spec job that I've been sort of touting this style of spec job for a long time, finding ways you can make something extremely cheap, which means generally, a single subject, not multiple people, because talent costs money, or it costs time and man hours and friendships and stuff like that. So it's a spec ad. It's an athletic spec ad. So we're going to be looking at some of the pros and some of the cons. So we'll do that. But before we get there, let's do some of the questions, right, that you guys sent in. And I think I saw some earlier in this little YouTube chat. So we'll start with those, because I know you people are in here. Okay. This one's Sherman Lowe. If you started out your cinematography career in the States as opposed to Australia, what would have been the main things you would have done differently? I know the market is much bigger in the States, but should my approach be relatively similar if I'm starting out here in Australia? Well, I don't think it really changes how you start out. I think I can say with a little bit of confidence, having talked to all the people on the podcast and heard their stories, that there is a gigantic chasm of separating how people start out, right? Some people, like Evan Persofsky, when we had him on the show, who had gone to, don't remember if he'd gone to film school, but he had done all his film stuff. He does one project that overnight becomes a Vimeo staff pick and accelerates from there and is on to certain jobs because of that singular job. Other people just trudge along for a long time, and then slowly but surely they get their name out there. I was fortunate to build relationships here as soon as I came to Australia, which allowed me then to find myself in a position where I could be shooting jobs that were bigger and bigger and bigger. I had done a lot of the legwork in the US, sort of learning the trade and not being shit at it, or at least being slightly less shit at it. But then getting here, it's all about relationships. And I imagine that's the same anywhere. You need to find people who are at your level or just below your level, realistically, because directors who are above your level are probably looking above their level, right? Everyone's always sort of trying to get to that next rung on the ladder. So really, it's about identifying people that you can have a relationship with, and then making some projects happen, making yourself available. So I don't know if I'd change anything from that point of view. In the US or in larger markets, there is just a larger undergrowth of people that are looking to do interesting projects, who are at the same level that you're at, which means they'll probably be on the same scale of project. They'll probably be used to the same scale of project, where as the market begins to shrink, the separation between the levels becomes more apparent, right? It's not like a gradual, it's like a graph in statistics. The less amount of input that you have, the more sort of herky-jerky the graph is going to be, right? It doesn't smooth out into this nice gradient, which it does in the bigger markets. So if you're in a smaller market, even more important to make relationships with those people in the immediate levels above and below you, right? You're not going to go to Ridley Scott and start, wanting to have coffee with him because he doesn't care about some spec ad with some athlete, right? You're going to want to pick the person just above or just below that needs your help. You make yourself available. You do good stuff. You make sure when you get the opportunity, they don't shit the bed. And that's it. I would do the exact same thing. Make myself known. Try and be helpful in any way that you can. And then when the time comes, you make yourself available, right? And there is some aspect, we've talked about it on the podcast before. There is some good things about being slightly cheaper, right? If you're slightly cheaper, or if you set a precedent for how much you are, that's good, because then you get contacted for jobs that have that amount of money. But if you set a precedent for being slightly less expensive, then people can come to you when maybe the job doesn't have that extra budget, but they still want to do something, right? Those are really the people that you have to identify, where it's like, if they contact you and say, we don't have a lot of money, but we want to make this. Well, usually it's bad when they say we, right? Generally, we is a bad thing. It's more so you want the director saying, I want to make something great. I want you to help me do it because I like this and this and this that you've done, or you talked about this and this and this if you haven't done much stuff before. And that's generally the language you want to be watching out for. And then you do one project with them. It builds. Somebody else is on set, especially when early on, when everyone else is helping on everybody's sets. The first AD ends up becoming a producer. The producer ends up becoming a focus puller. That never happens, but generally something like that. So it could be all over the shop. And it makes sense to be nice to everybody. that goes for all situations, especially because in smaller markets, if the one producer in your market leaves and that PA who made a music video one time all of a sudden is the only producer in town. So now if they like you, you're pretty much good to go. So I would say that's all I would change. I wouldn't change anything really if I was in the States versus here. It's just more opportunity, which means it's not less work. It's just a different kind of hunting for those opportunities. Okay, let's go. What do we got here? Benny. Starting cinematographer lighting kit to start shaping and experimenting with light. Aperture 120D and some flags and poly. Yeah, why not? What are you gonna, if you just want to experiment all by yourself, I'd get the cheapest lights that you could possibly get. Some little LED stuff. If you're gonna be using it for projects, maybe you go the 120D, or maybe you go some sort of, I don't know. They're all so different that really starting out with one particular light isn't really going to educate you that much. It doesn't matter where you start, right? I would start with what you like. Look at what you like. What kind of light do you like? Do you like big, soft things? If you like big, soft things and you've only got a certain amount of cash, I would get the biggest. Right now, if I was going to buy something, which I'm thinking about buying stuff for the studio that we're building and how we're going to light this actual set itself, I probably wouldn't do it like this. This is a bit sort of shitty. I would probably do it with light mats. I'd probably want some sort of RGB controllable light mats that I could have big soft areas like a light mat 4, but you could have it super slim line, right? Where this Aperture 120D, the problem is, I wish I could show it to you. It's a fucking balloon, right? It's huge. So the amount of room that it takes up means I got to move the desk forward. So the space aspects of it sort of bring down the 120D a little bit in my book. But for starting, it's great because you can do tons of stuff with it. It's got lots of output, lots, as in if you're in a dark room, it's got lots of output. If you're trying to overpower the sun, it's not really that much output. But if I was starting and I wanted to buy something that I was going to use on every job, I would use light mats on every job. There is never a moment where light mats can't be used, it seems. It seems like, and it's almost like getting to the point where, the light mats were pre the sky panel. But now it's like every single job, you can sort of find a place for the sky panel. You can sort of find a place for the light mats, especially when the RGB ones become more apparent, right? There seems to be like they can make RGB ones, but you can't buy them on their website. Only a select amount of people have them. But I mean, they make cheaper alternatives to light mats. It all depends on your level that you need. But I would say that particular style, if I was going to buy it and use it on all my projects, that's what I would go with, right? It's limited in its uses, but I can use it on every job. Limited in its uses meaning, it's not going to work for a super hard light somewhere. But very rarely am I lighting with that in mind, right? So if you're starting out, 120D, something with a little bit of oomph that you can then blow through things. Definitely the first purchase. And if you have nothing, the thing that's going to shape the most is going to be a 4x4 bounce and a 4x4 floppy. Those two things you can do a shitload with, as long as you're outside, right? If you're inside, you're pretty much hosed. But even with the floppy, you can do something. If you're there in the right time of day, you can start to really shape things with that neg fill. The only problem with that is neg fill is one of the hardest things because it's all about that last little, 10%. That knowing when too much is too much. And knowing when you don't have enough, like it's all the balancing. And really, it would be really hard to do by yourself, the neg fill thing, because you really need the gaffer or the best boy or someone to hold it in there and you go, oh, that's too much, back it up a little. Because if you go a foot back, it could change it immensely based on the room that you're in or where you're at. It could be a big issue. So I would say, any of the LEDs is a good place to start. The cheaper, the better, because chances of you ever using them past your first year is almost zero. Okay, let's do... What should we do? One more before we get going. Let's do. Could you speak a little bit about filtration and your preferences? Low cons, Black Pro Mist, Ultra Con. This one's from Harrison. The only thing that I've got that I use that I bring on every job, but I don't actually use. I got the Glimmer Glass. Right. I think I've got 4 different variations of Glimmer Glass. I use it when I'm bored. Would be really the main thing, right? If you're doing some retail commercial and it's like, oh, this sort of looks like ass. What can we do to make it a little bit more interesting, right? They probably, for some reason or for some purpose, we've got S4s or Master Primes, and it's supposed to be nice and clean and bright, and there's some source in the background. The Glimmer Glass is good. Other than that, I don't really do any filtration, and I'm not anti-filtration. I heard Roger Deakins say once that he doesn't use it, so I never use them. I'm lying. I haven't gotten around to it. I've been in the game for a long time now, and I still haven't gotten around to actually finding the need where I would be like, man, you know what I really want is I really want some halation around the lights, and I really want lifted blacks. Maybe it's time for experimenting, but I haven't really done that much, especially in commercials where you don't really get that much time. I got to get the camera together. I got to get everything set. I got to go out there and I got to test it. And then I gotta see if I like it, or do I just make the lens fucked up? Like, do I just get the Hawks and just shoot them wide open and have it all smeary, which is what I just did on this last job, which is gonna be fun to break down because it was Hawks and it was handheld and it was moving all around this big stadium and lots of people. So that's coming up on the podcast. But no, I haven't really done. I did. That being said, I did do the Pro Mist thing. What is it? The BPM. His first AC's right on the side of the map box. I did that for a little bit. It just didn't take, and by the end of it, is like, what am I doing? I can worry about changing out the strengths, like to have to think about it and go, fuck. Now we're putting on the 85. What strength do we go with now? Like, let's test it. It's like I just leave it. I can make it happen later, or we can, I don't know. That's just never been my approach. So, okay, let's do one more. What do we got here? There was one more on this Patreon page. Let's go find that. Okay, here we go. Benny already answered. Okay, last one. If you bought a set of lenses solely to make cash shooting them on commercials, meaning least cash outlay and most return, what would they be? I know it's not the most creative question, but this is the Wandering DP. Is that some sort of joke? Are you taking the piss there, Caesar? Are you trying to say that I'm not creative? Anyway, I'll answer. Well, least amount of cash and most amount of money doesn't really make any sense to me. If you're talking about the jobs where I'm at now, it is if you bought a set of Master Primes in 2004, you have laughed yourself to multiple houses by now. They came out, they're the exact same price as once they came out. They rent for, you know, an 8 lens set, or sorry, a 6 lens set. So 18, 25, 35, 50, 75, 100. The standard, you know, that'll go for, say, $1,200 US, anywhere between $1,200 and $1,500 US for the day. In Australia, it's even more. And you can sell them for more than you bought them for, because there's still a wait. Like if you want Master Primes, there's still a wait. And yes, it's a tremendous amount of outlay for lenses, right? A new set of 6 costs you probably 125 grand. But you have, that's, what is that, 14 to 2018 we're in now. That's 14 years of, let's say, $1,200 a day. And let's say, I mean, I'm going to talk about it in next week's podcast, which I just recorded. I did 49 shoot days this year. There wasn't a job where I couldn't have used Master Primes. So that would have been 49, just me. 49. And this was a slow year in terms of days on set, like proper paid shoot days. 49 is actually less than last year. But 49 times 1,200, you do the math. Yeah, you got to pay for insurance. But if you get something shitty, like you have to think, when are you ever going to use that in your career, right? If you get a set of Canon Cine Primes, which are cheaper, when are you going to, do you want to be using those? You know, even if it's a cheaper rental, do you want those cheaper rentals? It all depends on the market that you're in. I don't want to be using them. I mean, I'm sure that they're fantastic, but you're talking about being on, if you want to get to a certain level, you're on productions where they're spending, say, $100,000 a day. They don't care. They only care that the stuff works and it's good and that you're happy. They don't care if it costs $300 more, right? Very few times you're going to get lip service from people, especially in commercials. If you're trying to make your money back, that's where I'd be trying to make my money back, in commercials. I wouldn't be trying to go, oh man, I just got to get it out to these music video guys. If I can, you know, charge $200 a day, even on a cheap set of lenses, it's just too much work. It's too much hassle. Like if you're actually thinking about making money, I would say, and I've said it before on the podcast, buy the most expensive shit that you can that rents out for the most expensive price. And that is probably terrible advice. And I wouldn't recommend that anybody else follow it. I've just found that to be true in everything that I get. Literally everything that I get. Even the standard speeds. Like I've got a set of standard speeds. I don't want to get into it too much because I'm rehashing what I'll talk about next week on the podcast. But set of standard speeds that I got extremely cheap. It's still like standard speeds are normal accepted lenses, but getting them on a project that's right for it, and they're mine. I could get them on any project that I wanted. I mean, I could just say, well, this really seems like a standard speed commercial. You don't want to do that. Sometimes you want to be doing other stuff. But I would buy the best and not have to worry about it ever again. You know, it's sort of like the Leica thing. You buy the stills thing once, you pay out the ass for the lenses, you pay out the ass for the camera, but you never have to worry about it again. And you say, well, I don't have the money for that. Well, then save up. Get some other job. Okay. That's going to do it for that. Let's get into what do we got here? What do we got here today? Oh, we're doing a breakdown of, this is, I think it's Julian's. Julian, now I forgot his name. Julian. Anyway, it's Julian's project. And like I said, this is a spec job. And we're following this guy around. And we should probably look at a few of these so you get a feel of the commercial. We're following this guy around on a bike. He's some sort of motivational personal trainer guy. He's working out. And like I said in the intro, this is golden spec stuff, right? Because you only need one person. You need a gym, which can be open at odd hours. It's not an incredibly big space to light. This is thinking and playing to the future, right? If you can make this look good, hey now, we'll talk about this shot. Pew! We'll talk about that one. So he's in this gym. He's motivating people. He's motivating himself. So I think it's good from a spec point of view. Get some sort of production value from these tracking shots alongside this bicycle. Let's get into actually looking at this thing. Okay, so we've got him on this bike. Things that are great. Let's do things that are great. Things that are great is the sun is over here, and you got this nice little edge, right? This is good. There seems to be a lot of fill coming in here. I don't know what you shot on. If Julian, if you're out there watching, tell us what you shot this on. There seems to be, this could be a grade thing. There's still quite a bit of ambient pumping back into him. But you do have that edge, which is, this little edge here. This is nice. Not a lot of detail in the sky, but what we are impressed with is in here, this little dark bit. This is the good stuff. This is the stuff that comes from putting the sun over here, right? If you had the sun on this side, over here, it would look like complete ass getting hit from the front with all that light, right? So that's a good thing. That's what we want. Things that I would say other than that, which is why I freeze frame this one and grab this shot just because the angle is nice, right? Only thing could be, and it would probably be location and time dependent, is it would be nice if it was this way. You know, if the sun was up here, you'd still be getting all these backlights. It'd be a different road. Obviously, the orientation would be different. You'd have to clock everything this way towards it. But then you would get the edge sort of here. Let's see if I can do this. You get the edge this way, you know, where you want to be looking as opposed to right now. This is drawing all of our attention to his ass basically and his back. So it would be sort of, you know, just a different take and probably a different road to make it happen, or a different time of day. But I would say that if you had this edge, you got to be, when you're using that backlit edge, you got to be asking yourself, okay, well, where do I actually want people to look? Do I want people to look at his ass down here? Do I want people to be drawn to that? Because that's where the majority of the contrast is happening, just here, right? That's naturally where the eye is going to go. And then the other thing is just sort of grade decisions and whether or not you want information, in that highlight, you know, up in there. Do you want some color in there, or do you want to just leave it as gray as it is? So that was that one. We go to the wide shot, and this is where, you know, sort of some of the things that we've been talking about are in practice. But again, not a lot of contrast, like fairly low. Like look at how lifted those blacks are. They're way up here on the histogram. I'm not sure if you can see that stuff. They're way up, the blacks, right? If you dialed this whole thing down, if we take this and why is it locked in that little hole? Put that there. Oh no, I've completely gone backwards here. Close this. And let's bring up this path. Oh no, what's happened here? This is gone, so bring this out like that, and we should be back. Oh no. Oh no, pear-shaped. How do I get these layers back? There we go. Okay. So, what is going on here? Drowning. So, if we are looking at that, if you just pull the whole thing down, right? Well, you pull the whole thing down, you can see that you've clipped those shadows. But if you pull the whole thing down, what you get is you get interest in the foreground, right? That's just a little bit pulled down. You get interest in the foreground, which is exactly what you want. You want differentiation between what's in here, in this bit. Add a layer. Whoops, can't do that. Why? What's going on? Can't add a layer. There we go. You take all this away, so it's not the same level as him. You know, then you can pick him out easier. Grade, again, maybe you go a little bit less low con, and then this giant clump, right? If it's not the sun, it shouldn't be clipping. That's sort of when you're doing those wide exterior shots. You look at the Revenant, only thing clipping in those giant wides with the sun is the actual little circular sun. Everything around it has been kept, and that is not the case here. So you're losing all of that stuff there. That, yeah, I get it. It's hard to do, especially with a camera that doesn't have a lot of dynamic range. But the way that you get around that is what we've talked about before. This is a situation where if I was out there and I saw all of this clipping, I'd be like, shit, we got to do something. What we can do is we'll shoot at the highest acceptable ISO. So if we were on the Alexa, I'd say shoot at 1280, and then you add more ND in front. So you're balancing out your highlights. You're getting that extra stop of information, or half a stop if you're going from 800 to 1280. You get that half a stop of information in the highlights, and you just close down until none of this clips, right? None of that clips. And then you have to ask yourself, well, is this too dark for whatever it is we're doing? Can I fix it in the grade? Can I push it a stop later on in the grade to make it look like it just looked when we were looking through the monitor and all this was clipping? So that's what I would watch out for here in this situation. So I'd say bump up the ISO, throw in more ND, throw this all as much as you can out of focus, get this darker, and then that way he stands out more on the actual horizon. So That's that wide. Here we go, same thing. This is a little bit of a different, and why I brought it up. This is a sort of later in the day and still super lifted. Like, why is this not opening up? If we go to here and we just plop it in right there, what happens? Those we plop in there too. Plop in there. Okay. Come down a little bit. It's not going to work. People. Oh my God. We're just going to leave it out there. Make it bigger. This is a disaster. You can see this is sort of that curve that we've talked about before that you don't really want. You know, the goalpost, the whole goalpost idea of having this big separation. You want like a bell curve. And of course, these are generals, right? These are not, doesn't have to be like that on every single shot. But roughly, you want that smooth gradient from shot to shot. And so when you bring up this and you see the exposure, you see something's definitely amiss here. And yes, it's going to be dark here because you're not filling them in, and it's going to be super hot here. But if you bring this down, push, you know, then you start to get the sky sort of in a level where you want the sky. And then you got to figure out, well, what am I going to do about him? Whoops. Is he too dark? Is he too dark here? I don't think he's too dark there. And that's just bringing everything down, right? If he is too dark, you could fill in from, let's see, we add a layer. You could fill in from here, from whatever vehicle you're on. You could bounce back at him. I mean, I can see the vehicle in his little reflection in his helmet. But, you know, you can just fill in if it's too much. Or if you don't have that kind of crew, then you decide. You can bring this up in the grade. You can bring this down in the grade. You can do all of those things. But I would say try and, you know, you smush those values closer together, and then you can adjust accordingly as you sort of finish it up. Okay, let's go into the next one. This one, good. It was sort of in a sequence where it was, well, you can't see it. It was in a sequence where there was a lot of side lit stuff, but you've done sort of well with the position of this, and you've got, this is the nice edge. This is exactly where people are going to be drawn to. You shooting into the backlit bits, which is really cool. There's some sort of fill over here on this side for sure to get that amount of level, which could be coming from the grass itself because he's on like this football field. But I highly doubt it. I'm sure there's some sort of bounce over there, and it's nice. The main thing that makes it nice, though, is that you've got this shape here. You've got these transitions, which keep things interesting. You're edging out the parts that we want to be looking at, right? You got the muscles going, you got the head going. We could recognize who it is, and you're shooting into darkness. So that's what the differentiation between this bit here, even though it's a little bit hot, right? If we look at the histogram, where's window, histogram, you see you're getting that clipped bit. I imagine that's just in there, right? So you probably want to still come down from there, still come down, and either you don't want to fill in anymore because then you start to lose this shape. This, like I said, this even feels a little bit filled in. I'd probably back up whatever is over here. I'd back up a little bit, but just come down until you're not clipping there, or you just put up, because this is a fairly contained shot. If we go backwards, because it's a fairly contained shot, you could almost have this guy covered, you know, well, you could definitely get him with a 6x6, you know, just having something up here to take away the harshness of the sun. And it could even be like a little highlight, nothing major, not like quarter grid or anything. Quarter grid's not major, but nothing even as harsh as quarter grid, or as, what do they say? It's not harsh, but it's as dull as quarter grid. Even that would feel like a little bit too much. But then again, it wouldn't feel like too much because you're not shooting into direct sun. The only thing that's getting hit with direct sun is this. So the ground, when you're using overheads, is the real giveaway that there's been some trickery, right? If you don't see the ground and you're shooting into darkness, then you can use overheads all day long, and no one's ever going to be able to know, like, wait, it doesn't make any sense that they've walked under a tree or that everything's so soft. So think about holding those values in the skin and go from there. Okay, now we're into the gym. This is by far, if I back up, this is by far my favorite stuff, this particular sequence in the gym, and for a few different reasons. Number one, if we just talk about interesting things in the frame, you got this cool little line back here, which is nice, right? That's interesting. You got this line going this way, which is interesting. You got the red, you got the blue, you got the shadow over here, you got this gray behind him. This is light. This is dark. You got this little hot little edge over here. He's also sort of glistening, which, you know, that reflective light, that'll get you a lot of presence on screen without a lot of level. You know, so you don't need the 18K level if you've got that reflection. You see it a lot of the times in, you know, Roger Deakins' work. You see that reflective light happen again and again and again. You don't need that level as long as the angle is correct. So this is my favorite stuff. What I would say, you know, again, it depends on who's doing it. But if I was here, I'd say this is good here. I'd probably want to come in with something here and just bang that out a little bit more. Give him a little bit of shape on the face. Like you've got shape here, maybe just darken it down a little bit down here. So take this, if we switch this to dark, you know, darken it down in here and lighten it up over there. So I haven't done this correctly. Let's do it properly, ladies and gentlemen. We'll go to curves. We will open it up. We will take it down like that. Even that's not bad. You know, just slightly darker isn't even bad. But then let's say we invert it and then we'll make the brush a little bit bigger. And we'll paint on some darkness here. Paint on darkness, paint on darkness. And now that we've got a little bit of dark going on, let's blur it out. The old Gaussian blur going, and computer working at the world's slowest possible pace. That's too much. Come to the opacity, take it down. Let's see, why didn't that work? Take it down from there, like sort of something like that. Then we come back and we'll show you what we take up. Like this, invert, and now we're painting again. Paint in there. Get that eyeball in the mix. Throw something like that in along the edge there, and then we blur it. Ta-da! Man, this thing is crushing my computer. Okay, then we take that. That looks like shit, so we take it down a little bit. And this is overpowering, so we take that down a little bit. And you get the idea, right? It's just that differentiation on his face. Just pulling him out just a little bit, right? It looks terrible. I've done a terrible job. But you certainly get the idea. So that's all I would say here. Try and just get that little mark of difference on his face and play it through. But I can't imagine it would have been very easy because he looks like he's climbing something. He's up there quite high. So this one I brought up only because I would have done it slightly differently. If we add a layer and we shrink this down, let's see. Okay, so the very first thing that I see when I'm looking at this is it appears as though we have clipped extremes over here on the right hand side. You can see it on the histogram. Clipped extremes. We've got almost no shape on his face, right? There's no differentiation across the board. Like where is, it's just one tone, right? All the way across his face, which is never super interesting. You've got this little edge highlight, but then again, it's extremely hot. Even that edge looks like there's some little clipping on his skin. So what I would have done is grab this light back here. It's probably a skylight. I can't imagine that you put a light there on purpose to look like that. It's probably a skylight up here, which is giving you this edge in here, and it's giving you all of this blown out bit at the back. I would take that, I would just flag that completely off. Take that completely off. You lose this edge, but you also, this falls into a much darker situation. Then what you do is you create your own. If you do like that edge, you create your own, you lay it over the top, right? If it's a Kino Select, or if it's just a Quasar tube, you put that over the top, and what that gets you is then you get this little edge that you wanted, but you have the ability to dial in exactly how much level that you want, exactly how much edge that you want, and you don't risk blowing things out on the skin. You also have that little bit in the background, which will then have some color in it, which will have some depth. You play with it so it's just at the exact level. You know, like I said, if you got a spot meter, you probably want to be 2.5 stops under back there, or I would want to be 2.5 stops under back there. And then you find a way to get some shape on the face, right? I don't know if you put another quasar tube this way, so you're getting some light traveling this way across his face, or if you want to keep him in shadow, you know, it's like it's a very fine line. You either keep him in shadow completely and just use that edge to bring him out, or you give some shape to his face, washing him completely out. If you push back, just flat level back into him, which I don't know, these are, I can't imagine that you would have put up a bounce here because I don't see anything in his eyes. So I can't imagine that there's a bounce this way, but it's probably just lockers if you're actually in the locker room. But you know, this is one of those shots where it's an easy fix to sort of get yourself out of this. It just takes a little bit of time and a few lamps and nothing crazy, nothing big, especially if you're in a confined little closed area. So I would look at maybe taming that backlight, creating your own if you like that edge, and then finding a way to either go full black here, like make him darker, or add some interest by just getting, you know, an eye light like we talked about last week. You get one of those little eye lights in with that little dome, or whichever way you choose to do it. And then you just, even with a low amount of level, you still have to shape the level on his face, right? Like if you come in here, you still have to shape, even if it's just a little amount of level, still shape it. Don't just let it go straight onto him. So, okay, we got 3 more. I'm sure I can burn through this. Should I take 1 second and see? Because I haven't really looked at what's been happening. Is that it? Is this thing still going on Patreon, actually? I should probably check. I don't know. Okay, it says that it's going good, but I haven't had any questions. If you are in... all right, so John, at least someone's watching this. All right, we got 1 person on. Okay, just to let me know if this thing completely shits itself, that we're still going strong. So, okay. So back to this little shot here. Now we are inside. Now we're inside this little gym scenario where this guy is now testing or working out with this little lady, right? This little lady, they're in this gym. It's got windows on top of it. This is a hard location. It's a hard location because you want to be looking directly out this window, and it doesn't appear that this is a gigantic budget shoot. You are going to be fighting an uphill battle. And that's why if you're on a location scout and you're sitting there with the director and they're like, this is, you know, the location that we're thinking, this is when you got to start planting those seeds of like, Jesus, like you want to be looking out that window. Do you want them to be lit up in here, or, you know, what do you want the look to be inside here? And if they say, well, you know, we want it to be high key, we want to be able to read everyone, you got to see the product, if the product is the shirt or whatever it is, then you start going, well, gee, that's going to take a lot of light. We're going to need a shitload of level in here. And to have that amount of level is going to take a lot of people. It's going to take a lot of time. Easy way that you can get around this is just use that window light as the side light. Use it like in this example, right? This is a good example. This is the best of the shots in this particular location. You got this nice edge. If we add a layer, you got this nice edge here. You got nice shape on his face, right? It drops off to darkness. This blue thing, again, could be slightly more down, but there's some shape, and you're not really clipping except for the sky, right? And that could be just because of the camera that you're working with doesn't have the range to pull it in, but it seems to me that you could probably expose for out there and then get more level onto his face quite easy. You know, you could expose to hold those highlights and then get more level on him. It wouldn't take much. It's probably, you know, you're probably looking at M18 stuff, especially from the size of this shot. Don't know how rapidly you're moving through this setup, but I would say you could still hold that highlight. But this is the best of both worlds, and this is the angle that you would want to be talking about if you were talking to the director. You'd be like, okay, we can just ever so slightly see the window because we can put some, you could put some ND on this window, right? Which is, okay, now you've got a big budget and you still don't have a lot of time. I would say 12 by 12 net over that. And I use a 12 by 12 only because, you know, it covers the most space. And if you want to see a little bit more, it's better than doing like a little 4 by 4 net. 12 by 12 net out there. It's faster than ND depending on how many people you have in your crew. You just put up the net and you can move it around from shot to shot. Whereas the ND, if you put it on the window, oh shit, you can't actually see what I'm talking about. If you put it on the window, then you have to put it on each individual window. It takes time from move to window to window. So I would say if we had a big budget here, I'd go 12 by 12 net out the back out here. I'd say we need to bring in more level here, which would probably be an M18 through a 6x6 will get you this. And then I'd bring in some floppies over here, darken this down even more, try and keep the M18 and the 6x6 off of this wall to bring that down. So now we're starting to create these layers of shape. We're holding the highlights in the background. We can bring those down later. Or we're changing the time of the day that we're shooting in here so that instead of this being front lit or top lit back there, now it's being backlit and it's letting in a lot more level. So just things that I would be thinking about as we go through this entire shot. Then, because of the blocking here, this is where we start to get hosed. So we come to this shot, and this we have not saved a whole lot of information out there. Plus, we've got just flatness on her, right? You have this little tiny edge on her, but there's not much in the face region in terms of shape. Plus, we've blown out the entire back. Okay, so if you wanted to shoot this way, how I would approach this is I would say expose for the background, find out how much level you have to have inside. Find out the exact amount of level that you need inside so that you're still able to not clip anything outside. Because it doesn't look like you're looking into full, like it doesn't look like there's sun out there. It looks like, from the bits that are saved, it looks like the sun is somewhere up here. And it looks like it's hitting down this way. So the sky shouldn't really be, you shouldn't really have to worry about that blowing out too much. If one of these buildings back here is white, then you'd want to be worried about that. But it doesn't appear that there's too much stuff out there that would cause that many problems. So I would expose for the background. Find out, okay, look at it. Is it too silhouette-y? Does it look like dog shit? Do I have any instruments that are going to be able to bring in the amount of fill that I need? If you don't have any instruments, then you got to look at the nets, right? You don't have a net big enough to cover this. 12 by 12 is not going to cover this area. So you need to look at sort of rearranging the blocking with the director. If they're still not open for that, I would still opt for the silhouette stuff. You know, it doesn't really make sense for this ad. But you could, I don't know, you could M18 into a, you know, into the same 6x6 that you were using before to get you some level, to get you some edge. You could try and bounce back some onto her, just passive bounce if you've got no other instruments. But if you're going to do this proper and you had a budget, I would say have it so you were scheduled. Have it so if you were shooting in here and you had money, have it so you were scheduled so that the sun is, we'll switch to yellow. So that the sun is over here, right? Behind her, facing in. Not because we give a shit about, we don't really care about the amount of level that's coming in here from the sun. That's not what we're worried about. What we're worried about is the background, right? Because if one of these is a white building and you have all the money in the world and the sun is over here and it's hitting that white building and it's hitting all these, you're just going to be fighting an uphill battle. So I would say, don't fight an uphill battle. Try and get it backlit, even though you don't care about the sun because you're shooting into shadow. Then, say, again, if you've got the budget, you come in, I'd probably come in here. You're probably looking at, if it's full sun outside, you're probably looking at a 12K inside through a 12 by to get you balanced ratios, depending on how close you can get for the entire setup, because you know you don't want to be moving around 12K from shot to shot. There's just so much level. You don't want to be moving around from shot to shot. You sort of want to set the entire stage. So you'd probably be looking at 12K from over here through a 12 by or an 8 by, depending on the size of the room, coming this way. And then again, you go floppies because so much level will be coming off the 12K. It looks like white walls. It'll be bouncing everywhere. So you get 1 or 2 floppies and you're good to go, right? That's the sort of expensive way to do this shot. Okay. And very last but not least, this is an example of good angle, right? We've got our man out here. He's giving high five to our girl. This is good shape. What we got here is what we're looking for. We got light. We got dark. That's nice. we're shooting into, you know, what looks like ambiently darker background. You're clipping out here, but this could easily be brought down because this light, this is a good example actually. This window is not your lighting window, right? And this is exactly what you want. You don't want to be shooting into your lighting window. The window that is lighting him is probably, I mean, it is all one window we've seen in the previous shots, but it's probably the next black square over. So the next piece of the grid is what's actually feeding him light. So you could easily net this if you're shooting wide open, right? If you're not shooting wide open, you may start to see the net itself. But if you're shooting wide open, you can net this or ND it or bring it right down. Or if you're on the, you know, if you're on the first level or if you're on the ground floor of a building, you can just leave this as it is and bring in a lamp from this next grid area, flag it off so it doesn't hit the back. So this area goes darker in the background, right? This area goes darker because now you're flagging off the light. You're boosting the ambient level inside of the room, inside of where you're keying, but you're bringing down the bits that you want to bring down, right? Because you're shaping it. So you're boosting outside so that you can close down or ND down inside, which then will bring the background down. So one sort of decision leads to another. But this is good. You got the shape. You almost kept all the highlights. And yeah, it's a nice looking image and a nice composition. You know, you got them in the right spot in the frame, and all that stuff is good. So yeah, exactly. The friend zone high five. Yeah, this dude was in the friend zone for sure. Okay. That is going to do it for this one, for this little breakdown of him. I'll just quickly go back and check. I don't think there has been any questions. We'll do one little round, blah, blah, blah. What do we got here? People talking about the light mats. Yes. Okay, here we go. What kind of insurance do you need to get? Do you rent your equipment? Or what legal stuff? This was from Eddie. I have insurance, obviously, on all of my stuff. Who do I have? It was tricky finding it here because there's not a lot of Australian insurance companies that do just film. There seems to be quite a bit more in the States. But here, Aon, A-O-N. And yeah, you got to get insurance for all your stuff. Even though production has insurance, it's still going from spot to spot and being involved. I never rent out my gear to other productions. I only use it for myself, which you'll hear all about in next week's episode when I break down all the financials of the year, the shoot days, the production companies, the gear. What was a smart decision in terms of gear? What was a shitty decision? So that'll all be next week. But no, other than that, I don't have anything special for insurance or legal stuff like that. It's just your standard basic renter's insurance. There's a deductible if the production drops it or something like that, but it's not crazy expensive. Everything's covered. You sort of have to have it, or production won't take on your equipment here. So that's something to think about. Other than that, this is it. The end of live stream number 2. And now that I think about it, this will be the last one for 3 weeks. This will be the last one for 3 weeks because I'm off to Los Angeles. What is today? Thursday here. So 2 days from now, Saturday, off to LA. And won't be back for 3 podcasts. So sort of combining family and job all in the same thing. So it's good. And it'll have lots to talk about when we do get back and do the podcast. But we'll do more videos. So keep on sending in your stuff. Now I think I've come up with a system for cataloging everybody as they send in projects. So I'm going to get to them. And it can be a little bit more, I think it's a little bit more organized when I do the straight videos. But yeah, let's meet in LA. Uh-oh. Here we go. Yeah, I would set up a meetup. The only problem is, and it would be fun, the only problem is I get in and immediately start working, and then I go see the family in San Diego. So it's sort of popping in and popping out. But you never know. Maybe it works out. Actually, it's not a terrible idea. We'll see if there's any time, right? Because working, it's basically 5 days right up until Christmas time. So yeah, Benny, we can meet in Ohio. That works for me. Okay. That's going to do it, I think, right? We'll shut it down from here. And thank you for the support. And hopefully these are working and there was no problems with the audio. I did notice there was a bit of lag because the internet shit itself. So that could be an issue. But other than that, I think it all worked. So we'll see you in the next one.